It's not really like she did anything. She just declined to
See what it says about it.
Have it up now.
By the way, congratulations.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
In the absence of the chair and vice chair, I will call the meeting to order.
You too.
Give enough for a quorum.
Yes.
So there are 3 of us.
Okay,
So we have to have 6.
awesome.
According to Google, and I know what that means.
Yeah.
What you should do now in your position is have an election for a chairman pro tem.
Okay.
That way, I want to bring that up so nobody can fuss that we didn't do it correctly.
On the advice of Danny's friend Google.
That's how I can do my doctors. That's how I can figure out what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
So is there somebody who's willing to step forward to be nominated to be chairman pro tem?
I'll step forward.
Okay, Dan.
I'll second that.
So all in favor of Danny Shields as.
So, William Ellis, don't do me no favors.
William has volunteered to be elected chairman pro tem. And you seconded?
I did.
I heard the voice though, there I was looking the wrong way. Okay. So all in favor of William as our chair pro tem for this meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Thank you for doing this one.
All right.
I would.
All right. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes from 1/24/2024. Do we have any action on that or any?
I move we accept them.
Second.
Do you want to do, actually for,
In favor?
yeah, we can do a voice vote for something like this. So yes, let's call a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed.
Who seconded?
I second.
Danny.
All right, new business, discuss to brief, Clerk Brown's presentation. Does anybody want to take point on that, or do we want to keep this as an open discussion? I'm inclined to keep it as an open discussion if anybody has anything to add, because I don't think we need to go over our entire presentation again.
I would like to report, I spoke for us at the election board meeting and got some advice from that. And
Okay.
I think I shared.
So, yeah.
Basically what they have said, I wish Steve were here because he heard them say this as well, and Kylie did too. So if I go off track. It's going from my notes. So I think that the biggest discussion item from the election board was that there were 2 things. One was the suggestion that all current polling locations would be made vote centers. And some members were hopeful or under the impression that we would be able to reduce the number of locations for voting. And they didn't say, you must do this, but it was my sense after hearing from them that that would be a good idea if we could reduce the number of polling locations, each one being a vote center, but not as many as we have currently.
Isn't that the prerogative of, or the purview of the election board to reduce? I mean, we can recommend, but that's all we can do. We
That's
can
all.
recommend till the cows come home. And they can ignore us. They can say, thank you, we appreciate your input. And that's the end of it. So
Yeah, I think that they would like to have a report from us that had enough review of the pros and cons for doing that, rather than just say, oh, we accept that every location will become a vote center. So I think we will need to dig into the information we have about location, about number of voters, and we have that over several years. And the previous vote center study committee did do a lot of analysis, I think, of how they might consolidate some vote centers. So it's certainly, I think that the election board themselves would not, they'd like it if we would do some of the lifting for them.
Yes.
Did they give any guidelines like a 10% decrease? They didn't really talk about any specifics.
I think that this was brought up when I reported that in our meeting with Clerk Brown, that's the reason I'm bringing this up now, is that she sort of said, well, just make every location a vote center. And that's what they did in Marion County. And so that's what I said to the election board. And that was when they gave the feedback that said, you don't have to do that. In fact, we'd like you to do a little more in terms of thinking about how you might consolidate. I don't think that they meant like take them away from the outlying areas, make everybody come to the populated areas. I think my impression was that there might be some in populated areas where you could have many people going to, say, 2 instead of 5 locations or something like that, and expect to cover the territory pretty well.
Now, you brought Marion County. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that they just kept them open for the first election like that to get data on which ones would be busy. And then they did do some consolidation after. So in our document, we may want to address if that's something that we recommend or not. And another thing with removing vote centers and moving them, one of the problems is that there's no guarantee, even if we or this election board says this is where they're going to be, they'll stay there. So again,
That's always the prerogative of the election board.
That is correct.
At any time, with a unanimous vote, they can create or eliminate voting locations.
well, it takes a unanimous vote to approve non-precinct voting,
Mhm.
which is customarily done at the beginning of the year since we have super precincts. But with vote centers, I don't think the locations have to be unanimous. And I don't think they can, I don't think that is, we need to get clarification on that if we
Yeah.
could. Because one of the things, because the commissioners are also involved too on polling places. The election board, from my understanding when I served, we could advise strongly, and the commissioners usually took what the recommendations were. But they ultimately sign the contracts, they ultimately pull the trigger on where they go.
On the expenses.
Yes. So yes, the election board can say they're here, here, and here, but if the bills aren't paid, it's,
They could come back and say, you want 15, we'll fund 12.
correct. And they could decide where they are,
And yeah. But
And
that's always been the case with any voting location.
well, yes and no. Because if that ever did happen, the election board could withhold, one of the people could withhold unanimous consent, and then you'd have to default back to 92 different precincts to fund and staff.
Mhm.
There's always the red button nuke option. You don't have that with vote centers.
Yeah.
With vote centers, you don't have that. If it doesn't happen, you're in a vote center path, not precinct voting modified.
Mhm.
So I guess we'd have to find out if there's any type of agreements that could mandate population centers. If we do consolidate or change them, can we make sure that they're based on accessibility for different people? And could that be similar to an interlocal agreement that would be carried forth from one board, one term to the next? Because otherwise, anything we recommend, we may get it all ironed down. New election board, new party chairman, new clerk, new commissioners. They're going a different direction.
Still in the debrief of the presentation?
I think so, yes, yes. Because we haven't hit the provided documents then, because part of the presentation was talking about consolidating vote centers or removing some, so this would be that discussion.
Understood. So may I add something? I asked a question along these lines during the presentation and prior to that, and I'm gonna re-up it again as an area for our further exploration, which is I think that our committee needs to get a better understanding of the current barriers in order to be able to look at the possible solutions or changes, including consolidation, current barriers to voter access, including polling place access, or knowing one's polling place, anything in that realm that vote centers could potentially address or improve upon. So I'm looking for a further exploration. I know I'm getting to be a little bit of a broken record, and it's not that I need to put one particular person or presenter on the spot, but one of the activities for our committee can be to find out what is lacking right now, and not to assign blame. That's not the domain of our committee, but to understand what could be made better through the vote center model. And I don't think we've sufficiently focused yet on listening, do students run into particular issues or confusions of where is my polling place, or a whole range of other things that could come up. But I think we really need to explore that if we're even having anything on the table about reducing number of polling places.
So I'd like to add to that because we were talking, not last time, but the time before we met, about having public meetings. And I thought maybe instead of asking people, we didn't think we were ready to give out information, but I think talking to voters about what are their barriers and getting, having that first, our first public appearance being, what are your barriers? What causes you problems could be useful.
So more of an information gathering meeting rather than a
Right.
presentation.
Exactly. So we've been charged with this. What do you guys want? What's
Right.
what's problematic for you? Is it visual stuff? Is it transportation? What are the issues? I would love to see something like that.
My concerns in the few times we've met so far is that there's no clear way that we're going to roll into all of this effort that we're talking about. There's no schedule. There are no assignments. There's nothing other than we want something different than just saying, take what there is and make it vote centers. But there's no plan or strategy to attack that. So that to me is a big concern at this point. I mean, I'm tempted to say, let them sort it out. They're the elections. But
I do think a public meeting would be part of that strategy.
I think a public meeting would be great.
A public meeting, or even if, I don't know if there's a way to do an online survey, because my worry with public survey, or the public meeting is access, honestly, is if people will actually come to it.
Yeah, because these are public meetings
Yes.
so anybody could come in here.
And so like, if we're going to invite people in, which I think is a great idea, I think that having a company, and everyone gets a million emails and people are saying, but I think that like posing that question on a broader scale than what you might be able to get in the heart of Bloomington, it might also be helpful. So like having a two-pronged approach of perhaps in the next month or so, scheduling a public, like calling out for a public gathering to discuss these things while also sending out some sort of survey that is like 3 questions long, something simple about what are like check boxes, what is the largest barrier posed to you, and like just get that information and zip codes.
Danny?
Well, I'm going along with, what's broken, we're trying to fix.
Mhm.
And we don't know what's broken right now. I struggle to think there's a huge issue if you live, say, inside what we used to call a 2-mile fringe. And that gets out of the city limits a little bit, that it's difficult to get to a precinct. But if you live in other areas, you live in Kirksville, for instance, in that area, how hard is it to get to a polling place and to work and back home? versus walking a block and a half to the library. And, you know,
So I have two little stories from, this is just from having been a poll worker recently. It happens not infrequently that somebody comes to the polling site where I'm working and they're not supposed to be at that site, they're supposed to be somewhere else. And they say, oh, my kid goes to school here, so I assume this is where I vote. Or this is where I voted before, so I assume I still voted here. And we have to tell them, no, you have to be somewhere else. And they say, I don't have time, or I have to go to work, or I'm on my lunch break or something. And sometimes they will cast a provisional ballot. And that, no. They come then to the election board to be reviewed and they don't make it. The only numbers that I have statistics for is in last fall's election, and there were 15 provisional ballots. 2 of them were people who were at the wrong polling site. So that to me says it's fairly frequent that that happens. They were not in the wrong county or anything. They were Monroe County voters, but they just went to the wrong site. There always are a few people who are, for whatever reason, you know, they haven't changed their registration from where they lived before in Indianapolis or whatever. Then the other thing was, one time I was working on election day, and this fellow came in and he was in the wrong location. And we told him where he should be instead. And we told him where his actual correct location was. And he said, well, that doesn't make sense. My wife voted last week and she just went to election operations, basically. She could vote. It didn't matter where she had to be. And he didn't think it was fair that on election day, he couldn't vote just the way she could on early voting.
Mhm.
So I think that, you know, there'll be a lot of people who will figure it out.
Yeah.
Or,
my question there is who's at fault there? You know, he's had a month to get to vote center. He's had how much, you know, your friend Google will tell you
right.
where you should vote. And I struggle to feel sorry for people that don't take time to take care of business there on their own. I mean, that why should we spend X extra dollars because they won't take care of their own homework?
I think that if we had vote centers, it would help a lot of it. But I think to part of the point about trying to get public input, the people who are going to answer our questions are the people who just wake up, oh my goodness, it's election day, I have to go into school and
Yeah.
vote.
Right.
The people who know what they're going this far.
Yeah.
So I think that the people who would participate are going to be the ones, I mean, they may have friends or neighbors who are the other type of people, but they themselves will not have sad stories to tell us.
People do have lives. And multiple things to distract them. So it's not unusual for somebody to be driving to work and hear on the radio that today's your last day to vote. And, you know, or today is election day. And so I'm not surprised that people show up at the last minute.
Yeah.
We see it in the trends of early voting. It always increases the closer we get to the voting day. And I think anything we can do to make it easier for voters is a good thing. I was asked to be here to represent the interests of the IDD community, intellectually and developmentally disabled. And I take that very seriously. I was talking to the advocacy committee just an hour ago. And they are very encouraged by the possibility that we could make it easier for IDD individuals to vote closer to where they happen to be. They're not always near their homes where their registration address might be.
Yeah.
Some of them have to travel quite a ways during the day, and they're picked up by bus and don't have the luxury of getting into a car and driving to an early voting site or to the election site and voting there. So there's a lot of interest in groups like Stone Belt into having convenient voting locations that are easily accessed and accessible. I'm not going to continue on the path I was going at this meeting. I was really wanted to push things along because I didn't see the plan and structure that people have been building in their minds to roll this out. But I'm encouraged by what I see here tonight. I definitely don't think we have to meet for 2 years. But I would really like to see a schedule or some kind of a design plan that says, these are the things we really feel are important. That's showing up in the minutes today, I'm sure,
Yeah,
from all the
that,
discussion we've had.
with coming up with that, that would be within your guys' committee. Cause I know that the election board has basically give you guys free reign on how you want to handle your meetings, how you want it to be set up. They want you guys to work together to get
Yeah.
it how you guys feel comfortable doing it.
Yep. And
So,
I think that's great.
yeah,
I'm encouraged by what I see here. People have direction and good intent. So let's roll.
You don't want to, did you have anything you wanted to add about?
Something else that they advised us. I'm
I
trying
said there were two, but
You did say that, and there were at the time that I didn't remember.
I'm thinking from reading the recap that there was a question or a request about a timeline.
yeah. So they were asked about a timeline, but they have just said that they would like for you guys to meet for the 3 months and then come in. So at the end of March, you guys would come into the April meeting and tell them like what you're, like where you're at and how you guys are rolling. And if you guys think that you need another 3 months, or if you guys think that you're gonna have a plan ready by the next meeting. That way that they have like an idea of how far you guys are out, just to keep tracks with you guys to make sure you guys are rolling. But timeline wise, they just want to make sure that we have enough time to get in all of our equipment and get it sent up to the state for approval before the 26th election, which would be in May of 26. So we have time.
So, but stuff happens when you're trying to bring in new equipment,
Yep.
get new facilities, get everything ADA
Yep.
approved.
I
And
just want to make sure that we have
Yeah,
enough time to
and-
get everything sorted out.
educate the public.
Yep.
That's probably one of the big
Biggest,
things.
yeah.
I would love to see a chart of all the different things we need to do.
Mhm.
Which includes education of the public.
Yeah.
And that's going to be terribly difficult because it takes a lot of repetition for the
Yeah.
message to stick. Every
Yes.
time you say it, you may get 2 or 3% of the people and say, oh, yeah.
Yep.
So that means we have to do it 33 times.
Yeah.
We have to get the message out there and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it until everyone is aware of what we want to do. So do we need a subcommittee to kind of sketch it out? Or how do we approach this? I mean, the slowest thing in mankind is to toss something to a committee and say, resolve this, at least in government. And I don't mean to be negative about that, but I worked for government for 10 years. And I experienced it firsthand. Committees exist sometimes forever.
I think that question would fall under the third point here, discussion of next steps.
Okay,
Yeah.
So,
I think it's correct.
yeah.
so we ready to move on to introduction and dissemination of provided documents?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay,
I withdraw my request to the chair for distribution of documents. So now at number 3.
all right, discussion of the next step, so I kind of second what Al says, and I'll just say my thoughts is that I really think before we leave today, we should have 2 action items for the next meeting.
Yeah.
That get the data from, that we all kind of agree is consensus, and why we need it, not just having it, but why.
It would be nice to know the percent of registered voters in each precinct who vote over a 2 or 3 election period. So we can see if, hey, people have lived in this area, don't ever vote. Now, there could be a multitude of reasons for that. But if their numbers in a certain area are substantially lower than in a more downtown area, I think that gives us something we could look at to try to address. Because that would indicate to me either they don't care, we can't help that, or it's too difficult to get it done.
I would expand that. I like that idea and I would expand it to also, yes, we need to know that in terms of registered voters, and I would expand it to say also in terms of eligible voters in that given area.
Is there a simple way that we have that information? Or is that something that we need to figure out?
I know I can get our current of who is registered for each precinct. I will have to ask in the office about past to see if we have record of that. But I know I can get current right now. And for, when I say eligible voters, I mean using census data. So.
I believe that the forms on the document website, I know that after every election, we get a precinct by precinct breakdown. And it shows the percent of the people voted, so it's there.
Right.
Which elections you would want to look at?
Back to 2016, don't we have?
I think 2016 on would be good with an understanding that 2020 may be an anomaly in data. One thing I would suggest we discuss is that what the impact of vote centers are in current places or the places that have switched. Are we seeing more people vote? Are we increasing the percentage of people registering? Are we seeing more registered voters vote? Because if not, it's really an exercise of utility. If there's no data to say that this is a net plus.
Wouldn't have to have as many poll workers spread out, if the numbers stayed the same.
Well, not necessarily. I do know that when I looked at this when I was on the election board in 2017, 2018, not one single county had reduced cost in going to vote centers.
Yeah, I feel like because of the volume we get at vote centers, it's gonna be
Correct.
difficult to.
You're just shifting them to a different place.
Yeah, which may not, that's actually my biggest reservation with consolidating polling places into vote centers, if I'm being completely honest, and not just changing, because ultimately the same cost is going to be put in this
Right.
than like not consolidating, so why would we consolidate versus just making everything? Other than the logistics of making working a vote center.
Going to vote centers that people are gonna hear where they are during the day.
Yep.
So we really need information on work centers rather than population centers.
Well, and it's difficult to,
Populations, I know.
yeah, it's difficult to say who those voters are because they, I guess we would be able to tell by the ballot type that was submitted at that whole, that vote vendor, but it'd be difficult to tell where those, why those people are voting, where they are voting, versus why they're not. Yeah.
Wonder if there's any data out there from any of the other places that have gone to vote centers.
Yeah.
that would tell us how the percentage of voting shifted.
Right, and so we have several examples, right, Lafayette, right, or Tippecanoe County,
Right.
Marion County.
Yeah.
Could be
I don't
reasonable.
think anyone's asked those, that particular question.
But unfortunately, Marion County's not a light enough county. They're pretty uniform in population. There's not one major, I mean, obviously, there are a lot of people downtown.
Right.
But there's not one major population center like we have and then a bunch of rural. I know that Delaware County would be fairly similar. And when I looked at Tippecanoe County, that's semi-similar because of the college, and same with Tippecanoe. But again, all those things should reflect in the data if more people are voting. Because if they aren't, all we're doing is shifting where they're voting. And then, I mean, I'm not saying it's not worth pursuing, but is it worth pursuing if all we're doing is having the same numbers and just shifting to different places?
I agree that it's important we can benefit from those lessons learned. What we ask of or how we focus our time relating to some of these previous models could be something to hone in on as well, because while you make a really good point that not everything in Marion County is something we would even be considering or replicating anyway, but some things that could be helpful for Marion County is learning more about how they approached community education, given that they had so many
Right.
people. Community outreach, education, and engagement are some of the notes I jotted down, how consolidation was decided and how it's going, because
Bingo, that's,
I did want to be transparent about one of my sources of information relating to Marion County and takeaways on how the transition to the vote center model has been going, has been the nonpartisan organization Common Cause Indiana, who knew that I was going to be sharing this in this public meeting, that they were skeptical of the change to the vote center model and had a certain perspective on it as a voting rights organization. And earlier, when that model was adopted compared to now, that it's gone through several stages of implementation and awareness, people understanding how they need to plan in a certain way and where they can go. And I would like to see if there, even if it's some subset of questions that we can learn from their lessons learned. And Common Cause Indiana also pointed me and this esteemed committee to consider the example of Wayne County that apparently changed to a vote center model and then changed back. And even if it's simply, not all these places are equally relevant, but even if it's simply
Right.
finding out why did you change back, that might be something we can learn from too.
Hancock County did that also. I don't know if they've gone back to vote centers. But I know the reason in talking to, at that time, it was the county clerk in Hancock County. Because they were one of the first ones. One of the reasons they actually switched back is they had a recount situation in just like a township board. And that ended up having to be a countywide recount. And the cost, we're talking about a board that maybe 15 people would have voted for. Now we have to do a recount for the entire county. It wasn't easy but I think they changed their voting equipment. So there's no paper ballots or something like that, that's not an issue anymore. But that's, again, those are things we have to consider.
I think you mentioned a survey.
Yeah,
You did. I think a survey is a terrific idea. And probably something that's going to take quite a while to develop. I don't think we have the funds to go out and hire a company to do this for us, but there are lots of tools.
Yeah.
Available where we can put out quality surveys on our own once we identify what issues we want and clarify.
It sounds a little bit, yeah, because I think that it sounds a little bit like getting this information from both that we've been discussing about other good vote centers in other counties might be helpful in creating that survey because we can use the trends to generate the questions.
Yeah.
So I'd like to, I mean, I think that honestly, the easiest way of doing this might be like presenting on this next, having an actual slides that show the data in a way that is not just us all having to read the data on our own so that we can talk about it while it's in front of us. And I don't know if that means that one person wants to like consolidate it or if people want to take different counties and consolidate that information. But it seems to, based off of what we were talking about, we want to know about what the percentage of eligible voters are in our county, in Monroe, and what areas those are in, and who has voted in the last couple of elections, what the impact of vote centers are in counties that have shifted to vote centers and counties that have shifted to vote centers and then back, and then potentially back again. And how community outreach has impacted that. I think that is the biggest thing for me for building a survey is what is community outreach that has been successful or not successful in other counties that have implemented this, especially Marion County.
So if we're talking about 2 action items, what was the first one we kind of all agreed to? On finding out information, getting information for the next meeting, what was it?
Percent of registered versus eligible versus voted per precinct.
Um,
And we also talked about developing a schedule for how we're going to use our time.
Yeah, I mean, just again, this is just my thoughts. I'm not sure having the schedule too far out on what information we have and what presented, because as an example, when we get that information, that may lead us in a completely different direction than what we think now. So my thoughts is just figure out 2 action items for the next. Is everybody in agreement with that? Just
Yeah.
any more than that, we get bogged down with too many and not have a time to discussion. So 1 action item, I think, do we have consensus and agreement on the first action item?
Would you want to make the motion and vote for it? Just so it's,
Yeah, so it's in the minutes. Let's have someone make a motion.
so I will move that that's one of our action items for the next meeting is to have an information showing percent that is registered in an area and percent of those that voted. Did that
And-
cover,
And percent of those eligible.
and, well, that's kind
Yeah.
of, that's where I would, that
Okay,
was part
yeah.
of my.
Is it also possible to have that mapped, to learn that data and to see the data on a map?
If it's not, I'm willing to put it onto a map. I
Kind
can,
of like a heat map to
Yeah,
show.
thank you.
so if it's not already a thing,
Yeah.
send it to me.
Okay,
I'll see and then I can send it to you.
okay, so we have a motion.
I'll second.
Okay. All right, well, we'll go ahead and do a roll call for this, real quick. Al?
Yes.
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 Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
okay, unanimous. All right, it's passed. And the second item, we're still discussing, correct? From what? All right,
I feel like the second item would be, and I don't know, this is kind of a nebulous second item, so I do feel like there needs to be some discussion on how to make it not nebulous. Is the impact of voter centers on,
right.
and which like we have been collecting that data already, so it's hard to say concretely, this is the information we are looking at. But so that is my offering to the group is what information about other vote center counties specifically are we looking for? Is it what has been successful? What has specifically why, in Marion County decreasing or in Tippecanoe and Delaware, the decreasing of vote centers after having converted all of them to vote centers? Is that what we want to look at?
From my point of view, just data, did we increase did more people vote? Did the percentage of registered voters increase? And did more people registered? Percentage of eligible voters?
I assume they had a committee or something.
They have to
together
legally, yes.
to do this. So I would like to know how the recommendation differed from their implementation. In other words, they turned it over to an election board,
Right. What did the election board do with it?
how on target in what they did, because we may learn from that too.
Are we ready for that part now?
An interesting addition to that, just to make sure that with the information we get is good.
Yeah.
Might be in the elections that they had vote centers. Was the overall turnout substantially different?
That's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I'm
Okay, that
saying.
was your app, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Because-
If they got a 20% increase, but it was a 30% increase in total voters,
Right.
what does that tell you?
And at the same time, did they increase vote centers or decrease vote centers
Right.
over their existing?
We gotta dig into what those numbers,
Yeah, there's a lot of data analysis.
but the broad thing is just finding the data to see which ones to drill down in. If some increased at 30%, maybe we need to okay, what did they do right? If some dropped,
Yeah.
okay, what pitfalls but at least it gives us a place to look.
Are there counties that we mentioned, Tippecanoe County, Marion County, and Delaware County? Are those 3 the ones we want to target? I feel like there are a lot of counties that we could look at.
There are a huge number of counties that have gone to vote centers.
Yeah. But
But-
in terms of things that are similar to.
Yeah,
to-
similarities. Yeah.
To Monroe.
There's a good reason for Marion County. I like that reasoning.
Yeah. Wayne County was also mentioned as well as Hancock.
Yeah, one of the previous poll workers or poll employees of the county has a lot of information from the 2011 report and information that was gathered to put into that report. I can make that available to somebody, or I can tell you who the person is and you can contact them. Or somebody can contact them. Trying to remember.
Looking at that report, I couldn't believe how large it was.
Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of one of those things that, wow,
there are still people around who are part of that committee.
yes, I've heard from a couple of them. Okay, so we're still trying to hone down step 2.
Well, one idea I have is it seems like we have more things we want to know about some of the priority places, such as Tippecanoe, Marion, and Delaware counties. For some of the others, like, and maybe folks will have more to add to that priority list, so please chime in. For some of the others, like Wayne County I mentioned, I think mainly I may be underestimating the complexity of this, but I think it's probably a more streamlined question to try to probe for that. Why did you change back? You
Yes.
know what answer we'll get, but I don't think we necessarily need to be as exhaustive with everything we're wondering about for information gathering for every county. Yeah.
Oh, no, not for every county, just for, I mean, like I said, again, the way I envision, not speaking for the whole committee, is just, we kind of get the bucket of information, say which ones we need to drill down more on. And Wayne County would be one because they did switch back, so that would be data we would want to know what happened from pre-vote centers to vote. Center. And then afterwards, you know, what, because keep in mind, it would require a unanimous vote of the election board to go back. So it must have been a pretty substantial issue that caused them to flip back.
It sounds like maybe it might be 2 different data items that we're asking for. We're asking for the percentages of voters that actually participated in voting in elections after counties had transitioned to.
Before and after.
Before and after,
Yes.
I'm sorry, yes, before and after the comparison for potentially maybe these 3 targets that we're talking about. And then as a separate data set, why Wayne County and Hancock County switched back to.
Okay,
So I'd like to propose that they're 2 separate things. So we have 3 major data.
Sherry was thinking about trying to grab, she has a collection of information from the 2011 study.
okay.
So
Did you want to make a motion?
I was was that a motion?
Sorry, yes, I will make a motion to
Then
that.
I'll second.
Okay. All right, let's go around the room. Al? For the next action, that second action.
Yes.
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 Yes, who is doing that?
Well, that's the next thing. Then that would be,
say, yeah,
that would be quite, Kylie, is this too much for the office to get the information?
So right now, it's just me that's doing it.
Okay.
And since I just took the election supervisor position, it will be.
Kindly, I'm happy to help. I would love to make it so that it's not just you.
Well, once we get my position filled, then it'll be better.
Okay,
But we still have my open position in the office that would be taking care of this.
It seems like the Wayne County and Hancock County information should be publicly available.
Yeah.
Yes, it is something that has to be voted on, so
Yeah.
I'm happy to see why they changed it back. Okay, yeah.
yeah, all of it probably would be public information, just finding who to contact and getting it.
Yeah.
Would be,
I'm very good at digging through websites. So if I could interrupt.
So with Delaware County, Tippecanoe, and Marion County, we're getting the percentage of before vote centers and after vote centers of how many had voted, correct?
yeah, and should we switch Vigo County or Vigo, how do you pronounce that?
Depends upon what part of the county you're in.
Right.
Yes.
That might be, because I think they recently went to it. That's probably one of the most recent ones, I think. If it is, we might throw that in there because they do have Indiana State University, and that's again,
Correct.
a core population center with rural communities.
I'll let you know if I can't find them, they're ready.
Yeah.
So I had one thing that the election board did say was that they had received, they did not tell us what, but they had received, I believe, data from 3 counties.
Oh.
And that, and somebody was going to provide that to our committee.
I believe Molly was supposed to be getting that to me and has not made it my way yet. So I will contact her tomorrow for that.
And then they wanted 2 more. I don't know why but they wanted that kind of information.
Yeah.
They were willing to share it with us. And I don't know if they think then that those are the 5 counties that we need I think we should choose the counties that we think will have answers to the questions
Right.
that we want to have answered. But if there is additional information that we're going to get,
We might as well use it.
election board, yeah.
Any more discussion on this?
Please reach out if you need help.
Okay.
I mean, collectively.
Yeah, I will send an email when I find it, and if I don't find it, I will also send an email.
Any public comment? That would be you, Dave.
Anybody on online?
Anybody online want to say anything?
I think they actually have comments turned off, but they can raise their hand.
So I don't know if you heard, raise your hand if you had a comment. We have 2 pages of people.
Oh, I see one.
That's the one.
Was Dave.
Oh, that was Dave. Okay, testing.
Yes.
All right,
Okay, yeah. We're good.
all right. So I'll entertain a motion to recess and adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Likewise.
I don't forget.
Yeah, what do I have to say for the chocolate?
I know.
Very nice.